Hey, Julia Barzik here from Wise Investigator. Welcome to another former program officer interview. Today I was joined by Dr. Dev Palmer. Dev is a veteran government R&D leader. He brings 30 plus years experience spanning DARPA, the Army Research Office, the Department of Commerce, and industry leadership at Lockheed Martin. He's managed and shaped major research portfolios that are collectively tied to nearly 4 billion, that with a B, dollars in funding. He brings program manager experience from ARO and DARPA. Dev holds 4 U.S. patents. He's authored over 125 publications. He earned his BA in physics and an MS and PhD in electrical engineering from Duke University. In this interview, Dev will break down how to think like a program manager so that your proposal will be understood clearly, perceived as relevant, and therefore fundable. He is going to tell us what program managers are actually optimizing for and how you can work strategically with these program managers. He's also going to share how to frame your idea for mission relevance without guessing or overreaching or overpromising. And he's going to share with you the must-dos to keep your strong ideas from getting tossed on technicalities. So let's get right into it. All right. Well, Deb, can you tell us, when you were a program manager, what were you actually trying to accomplish in managing your program?
Well, that's a great question. I think what was the most interesting to me as a program manager was trying to identify new research problems and create communities around those problems, working on a solution, often combining seemingly unrelated breakthroughs in different fields and bringing together research communities that don't normally work together can give you some really surprising and outstanding results. But this is not, in the case of my experience at DARPA, not just art for art's sake. So you have to be able to draw a line between the solution that you come up with and some return on investment for the PM and the program office mission. For example, a large capability improvement in a military system or a military mission.
Okay, thanks. That does provide a helpful high level view of what we're going to get into today. So, if somebody is not able to watch this whole interview and they want to come away with one takeaway, could you tell us just what that one thing is about getting funded that a faculty member should remember?
Yes, absolutely. In a lot of people's minds, the relationship is just between the principal investigator and the program manager. And the program manager throws the money over the wall to the principal investigator, and they work on their research and send a report maybe once a year. In my experience, when your research is funded, you're really teaming with the program manager and you're helping each other succeed. So it's useful for the program manager to think about what measures success for the PI and vice versa. For the program manager, it's usually very helpful for the PI to develop a technical working relationship and stay in communication, respond to requests for information, and give the program manager clear and concise news about your program so that they can advocate for you and defend your program to their senior leadership.
Absolutely. Okay, well, taking us a little bit further back in time, then, could you walk us through the life of a proposal or even a funded award from the conception of that idea, the process that it goes through, just starting wherever you think makes sense to start and taking us as far as you think makes sense?
Yeah, I'd like to start a little bit left on the timeline from the actual proposal submission. Another thing that another misconception a lot of people have is that program managers sit on a giant pile of money and dole it out to the worthy, those that they deem worthy. Actually, program managers have to earn their budgets by presenting good ideas to their leadership that fit in with the organizational strategy. And that organizational strategy is part of the government science and technology enterprise funding process, where Congress, or in the case of the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, will reach down into the various funding agencies and ask them what their strategies and needs are for the upcoming year. That's got a long time horizon because The plans get approved and modified as they go up the chain until they finally reach a proposed budget to Congress. And then the Congress has a 3 or 4 step process to get from originally formulating the budget to actually sending the money out to the agencies. And then they monitor the agencies to see how well they are performing on their programs, just like the PM is monitoring how you perform on your on your research project. So the proposal that you write, in a way, is the leaf on the tree, even if it's responding to a solicitation for fundamental research because of the background that's gone into it. So really, you need to understand the goals, objectives, and intent of the senior leaders in the program office you're trying to work with. Write your proposal from their perspective with a focus on how your research is going to advance the program and or office goals. Now, once your proposal gets funded, understand that you're part of a team that includes lawyers, accountants, contracting officers, and technical leaders on both sides of the desk, and figure out how you can work with them to make their job easier. It could be as simple as making sure you're using the current version of the right template for your report or presentation. Certainly, timely and accurate billing is important, more important than you might think, and off-schedule reporting for important results or program changes, etc. So during the project execution, you also have to stay on top of external changes in your field that could impact the significance and relevance of your work, and get some idea as early as possible where the program office is trying to take the technology, and start working with your potential tech transfer partners or commercialization partners as early in the process as you can.
Okay. So if somebody is interacting mainly with a program manager, that's their point of contact, would it make sense for them to that PI to trust that the program manager is communicating that bigger picture information? Or should the PI try to gather that information that you were talking about coming from the higher levels themselves? How would they know, okay, do I have the most relevant and up-to-date information to inform what I'm doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd take a quote from the intelligence community and say, trust but verify. Certainly trust what the program manager is telling you, but take advantage of the website of the program office. Take advantage of the fact that the government actually publishes a lot of information about their science and technology strategies. And in fact, for the Department of Defense, you can even find publicly available budget descriptions for projects that talk specifically about what the organization has told Congress they're going to do. This is another example of looking at your work from the audience perspective and making sure that you're aligned with the broader thinking. And if the program manager says something that you don't understand, don't worry about asking questions. I mean, listening to what the program manager wants to say, both in terms of strategy and technical interest, is very beneficial.
Yes, and I think that along the lines of making yourself helpful and a good teammate, that PIs could forget or not even realize that they can actually provide useful information to the program manager about where related work may be going on elsewhere in the federal government. Because when I was managing a program in geoscience and civil engineering, I had a lot of different labs that I coordinated with throughout DoD, but there was certainly much related work going on within the federal government and even within DoD or Army that I was not aware of, because you couldn't be aware of everything. So when a PI can link you up with a useful collaborator or contact, that's a way to contribute maybe more than a PI realizes that they can. Would you agree?
Yes, 100%. And the flip side of that is that the program manager is not going to be able to follow all the details of the technical innovations that are happening in your field. I don't think it would offend any of my program manager colleagues for me to say that most of the good program ideas don't come from the program manager. They come from conversations with the performer community, which
Mhm.
underlines the importance of developing a working technical relationship with people in funding agencies.
Okay, so what were the top signals that you saw in a proposal or even just in a conversation about an idea that told you this idea should be supported?
That one's easy. From the DARPA perspective, it's the number one top signal is a revolutionary and innovative core idea. If you see a proposal that has a complete, incredible idea that turns a well worn assumption on its head, that's gold. It could also be an idea that significantly accelerates progress along a defined roadmap, or better still, renders that roadmap obsolete. So it's innovation and impact are the top signals.
Great. And then what would be something that proposers might think matters a lot, but it might be less important than they assume?
Well, I know when I first started writing proposals early in my career, I thought a lot about what the specific steps in the technical plan should be. And in my viewpoint, the best proposals are built around an idea that seems impossible and then gives you a plausible technical plan that has a series of achievable steps that get you from here to there. So carefully planning the technical approach is essential. But I think we all know that research never goes exactly as planned. So you have to be ready to adapt your technical plan as you learn through the execution of the program. And your proposal needs to show that you understand that more than it needs to show that you have a priori defined technical plan.
And I think what I hear coming from that too is that if and when, most likely the technical plan changes, if it's built around a very important core idea, then there's still going to be value coming out of the work, right?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely.
So, could you tell us about a time, either with anonymized details or maybe even a hypothetical, of a time when a proposal or an idea was funded, even though it wasn't perfect on paper, it wasn't a perfect proposal? How could something like that win in the end?
Again, I'll just go back to saying it's the core idea on the proposal. If
Hmm.
there's a core idea that's compelling enough, and as long as you haven't ignored the solicitation to the point where your proposal is non-conforming, then the program manager can accept a less than perfect proposal, tech plan, team, et cetera, and work with the PI to shape the effort during the execution. Really, the thing is the core idea, the innovation and impact of the core idea. I don't think I can repeat that enough.
Okay, great. So, then moving on to some problems that can arise, like mistakes and how they could be fixed. What were some of the most common mistakes that you saw PIs make when they were proposing ideas?
Main one is structuring your proposal like a journal article where the results usually show up at the end. Again, thinking from the perspective of your audience is very important. The review team, the evaluation team is going to look at a lot of proposals. And they were probably picked because they already know the background to the technical problem. So you don't need to tell them that again. What they are looking for is what distinguishes your proposal from everybody else's. So this is where the bottom line up front principle really counts. Hit them hard on the first page of the proposal. They're ranking proposals based on their potential, essentially, return on technology investment capability wise. So you need to make it really clear. I also will go back to my ARO days, and there were a couple of times when I got proposals from established professors that read something like, here are the great things I've done, and here's how much money I want, without ever telling me exactly what they were going to work on. And that's an immediate no. The other place where people trip up occasionally, particularly with DoD solicitations, is guessing at the DoD application. If this is a fundamental research program, your job is to expand the design space, not to guess how it's going to be used. Because to be frank, I mean, when I was an ARO PM, I didn't know how it was going to be used either. Classic example of that is the work that was funded on the laser. I don't think the program manager in their wildest dreams ever thought there'd be one in every supermarket checkout. Um, and if you're working on a more advanced proposal, like you might, more advanced technology solicitation, like you might see at DARPA or other agencies, the application's pretty well specified in the broad agency announcement or the solicitation that they use. And again, once you've put in a proposal, you can't really talk too much to the program manager, but you always can submit questions that, or almost always can submit questions that get published in an FAQ. And that's really key. It's better not to guess. It's better to ask a question and spend your time giving the PM and the review team what they need.
And I do think sometimes PIs can feel hesitant to ask a question because they feel like this is something that I should already know. But you could probably back me up here to say, even if they're given instructions like prepare a white paper or prepare a quad chart, it's the best approach would be to ask exactly what do you want out of that document, because even something that is fairly standardized in terms of what a quad chart is, I've even seen some different iterations on that in
Hmm.
recent years, so that very well could be changing, so it's never a dumb question, right?
Absolutely. If they don't provide a template, then it's worth asking that question. But
Mhm.
also, just as a slight digression, I think when I was between ARO and DARPA, I probably was part of writing, I don't know, 30 to 50 topics or solicitations over the years. And I can't tell you how many times I'd get a proposal back and say, why are they sending me this? And then I'd reread the solicitation. And I realized that I knew what I meant to say, but it doesn't come across clearly in the BAA. So that's another case where you definitely should ask for clarification.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So sometimes good ideas don't make it through. Could you tell us about how a good idea might not be successful? What kind of things could go wrong? Maybe there could be some how would a PI know to be encouraged to find maybe another home for that idea or to resubmit? How can good ideas fail sometimes?
Well, the most common way I've seen good ideas fail is through a technicality that gets caught in the administrative review of the proposal. So be sure to follow all the instructions, even sometimes down to the font size and margins. It kind of depends on how strict the administrative review team is. But it's very frustrating to the PM when that happens, because part of the metrics of a program manager, particularly at DARPA, is how innovative and impactful are the ideas you get. If you see a really good proposal go by the wayside because they used a 9-point font, I can't tell you how frustrating that is.
Or
Um,
missing a deadline, perhaps? Yeah.
Missing a deadline's a big one. So I guess that's where that that's the most frustrating part. There's certainly other reasons why it might happen.
Okay. So then we're getting into this a little bit, but anything else about when a PI hears something like their proposal's not responsive? What can that look like? We talked a bit about some technical mistakes, but what else could there be going wrong?
One other technical mistake in particular, is not providing complete budgetary information. Of course, when you're a PI working on a research project, you think that the research is the most important thing. It's a necessary but not a sufficient condition. In terms of the subject matter, I've seen proposals that essentially tell the PM, I know what you asked for in your solicitation, but I have a better idea. Don't do that. That is definitely not responsive to the solicitation. And also, I have seen proposers recycle proposals from a different solicitation, and those are usually non-responsive, even if it was a related technical topic. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you go through the final version and make sure you didn't miss any spots where you forgot to find NSF and replace it with DARPA. Don't laugh, because that has happened more than you might think.
Yep. Sure. So when a PI is looking to make contact, they're trying to figure out where their research might fit and then trying to actually speak with a human at that organization. What advice could you give them for figuring out which program might be the fit and how to make that first contact?
Another great question, if you're talking about which program is the right home for their idea, first off, is it in your technical area? Do you have some experience? Do you know the history behind the problem. So can you make a credible response? And be honest with yourself about that. I like to see creativity and aspirational reaching for big results, but it's got to be credible. You got to be able to make sure that you can deliver on that. In terms of making first contact with a program manager, almost all program managers are motivated by finding new and highly disruptive ideas that potentially could form the basis of their new programs. So when you're talking to a PM, especially a DARPA PM, you should talk about ideas that could lead to a new program by demonstrating a previously unthought of capability of a particular material or technology, or doing a proof of concept of some new technology idea. And don't present your ideas and your approaches for programs that are already on the books.
Mhm.
Behind the scenes, the program manager will be thinking about whatever strategy and structure their leadership apply to program metrics. So you should think about that too. That's a reasonable topic for conversation with a program manager. And just like everybody else, program managers are most receptive when you do their homework for them. So if you could answer some of those questions for their next program, that'd be great. One more
Mhm.
thing that I think is an interesting approach. I've been involved in the IEEE for most of my career. And I find that when I get involved on conference planning committees, a lot of times there are government people and industry people on those planning committees. And it's great if you have something to work on together that's not directly associated with them giving you funding. Gives you a chance to get to know each other and establish a working relationship, understand where each of you are coming from, and that can translate into a much higher rate of success. Now, when I say that, I have to make the disclaimer that, of course, you still have to write a good proposal and you have to have a good idea, but at least you'll know the context a little bit better.
Absolutely. Okay, so then moving on to good ideas and strong proposals, what would you want to see in a proposal, the proposal document itself, in that first couple pages that is going to make you as a program manager and also the evaluators get excited and want to keep reading?
The first couple of pages pretty much have to be your executive summary, a bottom line up front, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. So tell me why your idea is different from what's out there today. What's the new idea that allows you to solve a problem that no one's been able to solve before? What does your proposed team bring to the table in terms of experience, expertise, capabilities, facilities? And also, who cares? If you're successful, where is this going to go after the funding runs out?
And then to get a little bit deeper into the research plan, what are some things you look for in a plan that will tell you this is credible and there's always a little risk, but it's not too risky to make an investment?
Yeah, a credible plan will lay out logical, achievable steps to de-risk a technology. And when I talk about de-risking, I mean take it from an idea that sounds impossible to a technology that you can actually test in a meaningful way. So another thing that people gloss over often in their proposals is the risk matrix. To me, the risk matrix is there to identify the main things that could happen that would derail your effort and prevent it from succeeding. So you don't want to just define a risk and then have your mitigation be, we'll figure out how to solve this risk. You you need to actually propose another, perhaps more complex step that could solve the problem if your initial um, approach does not work. I want to see um, I want to see some meat behind those mitigations, not just an assurance that, not just a trust me, right?
Or sometimes it's even just like one or two sentences, right? It could be a little light. I mean, we don't know what those sentences say. Maybe it's enough, but it could be a little light. Yeah.
But if you look at a common proposal, I mean, a common research program structure has phases, and the phases typically at DARPA are going to be gated by demonstration that you have burned down that risk. So when I'm talking about a risk table, I don't need it to have 50 entries. In fact, that's probably counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the two or three main things that would prove you wrong in
Mm-hmm.
a way, and how are you going to fix that?
Okay. Or you mean even like in like a go, no go type to move
Yes.
on to the next phase. Okay.
Yep. Right.
Sure. So then specifically about DARPA, say, and maybe DoD a little more broadly, how would a PI who doesn't have experience working with the defense community, is maybe coming from basic research, curiosity-driven research, how would they be confident that they could frame their research in a way that resonates with the DoD evaluators if they don't have that experience yet?
That's another place where early interaction with the program manager is absolutely critical. Understanding what they consider mission relevant, understanding what they know about the field and where they're trying to go with their technology of interest is another thing that you can get out of these conversations. And it's important to remember that these folks are public servants by and large. They get paid with U.S. taxpayer dollars, and so they should be answering your emails and phone calls. If they don't, it's not because they hate you or they think you're stupid. It's because they're very busy and they get probably 50 to 100 of these inquiries a week. But there's no reason you shouldn't continue to ask for conversations like that. Another thing about the DoD is that it's not all system development. The DoD is a very large funder of fundamental research that is curiosity driven. The main difference between that is I think the definition of basic research is in the DoD financial manual is research with no application in mind, which hardly ever works with the Department of Defense. I'm not sure why they define it that way. I mentioned earlier you have to draw a line to a DoD return on investment in terms of capabilities. And I'm not suggesting that you say, my research is going to increase the range of fighter plane with the tail number X57 or whatever it is by 10%. It's more like this technology could make communications in previously unused or inaccessible communications band possible or more efficient. Again, expanding the design space for the DoD system designers. You're just trying to find out the art of the possible, if you want to put it that way. And that's a good place to start with DoD folks. DARPA had the Young Investigator Award. Most of the service research, basic research offices have Young Faculty Award of one kind or another, and PCASE awards and things like that, which are not application driven. Once you have established a foothold in that area, it's a natural progression to learn how to frame your research in a more DoD relevant context.
Certainly, and certainly attending things like program reviews, if you do get funded on something and then you're able to participate in something like a program review, that can be a great place to really broaden your horizons as to what else is going on, what else is being supported. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Sure. So PIs hear about transitions and that transitions may be important. So from your perspective, what is a transition or what could that mean? And how important are they to a PI?
Clearly, transition means different things for different projects. If you're in the formal acquisition world where people are buying military services and systems, it means that a program office, which is an office that manages a particular weapon system or or mission area, sees enough value in the technology to be willing to budget for it and pay to transition it to a fielded system. In my opinion, it's unreasonable to expect that the technology under investigation in any reasonably sized project is going to transition to a program of record, which is a program that's formally approved and funded by Congress. within the typical lifetime and funding scope of, say, a university project. When transition's important, a good solicitation is going to define what they mean by it. DARPA had 7 different categories of transitions, and for a university program, it could mean something as straightforward as dissemination of the results through journal articles, conference papers, patents. But better yet, it means that your results are so compelling that it attracts follow-on funding from a more mission-oriented organization.
Yeah, that's a demonstration of interest for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, could you tell us about a time when proposers were successful in communicating high mission relevance and maybe the outcome of what that could look like for someone who's coming in from maybe more of a fundamental research perspective?
Well, I can tell you, I can give you an example of when that really didn't work.
Sure.
was was when a proposer claimed that their breakthrough was going to revolutionize the Army field uniform. The process for redesigning the Army field uniform is quite detailed and has many, many places where people can say no. And the credibility of that claim transition was just not, it didn't even register. Oddly, the most compelling transition in my career came from a fundamental research project that didn't talk about that talked about a completely different application from where it ended up. The the PI was experimenting with how electronics respond to different kinds of electromagnetic radiation and happened upon an unexpected result that I immediately saw had mission relevance. So, working with some of the more mission oriented organizations, we actually figured out that this new concept could be implemented by just doing a software update on some existing systems. So, I can't really go into any more detail than that, but it had a major operational impact. And that was absolutely not foreseen at the start of the proposal. So that underlines the importance of one, working closely with your program manager and keeping them in the loop, and two, early interaction with the broader government science and technology community in your technical area of expertise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now, because we've been talking a lot about that program manager role, which is super important, especially for early career PIs to understand that that's how they're going to make entry into this ecosystem. But you have spent a lot of your career also working at very high levels where you're developing strategy and implementing that strategy. What kind of thought process went into that, say, portfolio development strategy? So moving from beyond a program, but when you're managing a unit within the organization, communicating that up to very high level government leaders. What are you thinking about when you're in a role like that?
How do you redefine the technology area, basically? But it's a little more difficult than that because the portfolios exist within that overall organizational strategy that we were talking about earlier. The overall strategy set, or at least loosely defined at the office or agency level in most of these organizations, and it's up to the program manager to use that strategy as a framework for the solicitations of the project and the selected projects. So mine, I think the main principle I used was to blend the risk levels of the types of programs that I funded in the portfolio. For example, at the Army Research Office, that's essentially a fundamental research focus, but I always had between 5 and 10% of my portfolio focused on technology transfer, which caught me a lot of return fire from the director. But when the generals came around for a visit to see what the Army Research Office had done for the warfighter lately, that paid off big. And also knowing where the transitions were going to happen in some of the projects helped shape the arc of the fundamental research projects as well. So conversely, at DARPA, which is an organization focused primarily on creating and transitioning new capabilities, 5 or 10% of my program was on fundamental research to explore technologies that could form the basis for my next program. That's really, it really pretty much sums it up. It's really fun to run research portfolios. I think you would agree. And I think any PI out there, depending on where you are in your career, if you have the opportunity to do a tour as a program manager somewhere as a rotator, that will change your perspective on the entire process more than just about anything else.
Yeah, good advice. Well, speaking of fun, this is a fun question here. So, what was your favorite aspect of serving as a program manager as we wrap up our conversation? Could you tell us this?
It's the people without a doubt. The people on the government tech team, the support staff, the excellent people we funded, the excellent people we never funded. In short, the whole community really was the best part about it. Early on, one of my mentors told me that being a program manager gives you lots of temporary friends and lots of permanent enemies. But I'm happy to tell you that in my experience, it was mostly permanent friends.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Dev, for sharing this wealth of information with us. We really appreciate it. It was great to speak to you today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.